The moonlight cast long shadows on Ijeoma's wall as she sat on her bed, her mind racing. She thought of Odeh's voice, his words, and the undeniable pull of their last encounter. Her heart screamed caution, but her body betrayed her. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it hesitantly, her chest tightening as Odeh's name appeared on the screen. Would she answer or let temptation win? "I couldn't stop thinking about you." Odeh's deep voice came through. His tone was soft, deliberate. Ijeoma felt her heart race, torn between guilt and a longing she couldn't explain. She hesitated, then whispered, "Where?" The weight of her decision hung in the air, but she couldn't take it back now. Dressed in a red sundress, she stepped out into the night. The air was cool, but her skin burned with anticipation. Odeh stood under the streetlight, his posture confident, his eyes scanning the road. When he saw her approach, his breath caught. He reached for her hand, hesitant but firm. She didn't pull away. The world seemed to fall silent around them. "You're all I think about," he admitted. His voice was raw, filled with emotion. She looked away, but her heart betrayed her. "This feels wrong," she murmured. But even as she spoke, her feet stayed rooted to the ground. He closed the distance between them. "Ijeoma, I can't stop now," he said, his voice low and filled with longing. His breath warmed her cheek, their faces so close that the world outside ceased to exist. Ijeoma's pulse quickened, her body betraying every rational thought. When Odeh's lips finally met hers, it was as though the dam of restraint burst, and their unspoken desires flowed freely. His hands gently cupped her face while hers trembled, unsure yet unable to resist. For a moment, the chaos of their situation vanished, leaving only the magnetic pull between them. This wasn't planned, but it felt inevitable. Their kiss deepened, each movement more desperate than the last. Ijeoma's hands clung to Odeh's shirt, her breath hitching with every stolen moment. Odeh's arms wrapped securely around her waist, pulling her closer as though afraid to let go. Every touch ignited a fire within her, and every second blurred the lines of what was right and wrong. The street was eerily silent, as if the world conspired to keep their secret hidden. But within her, a small voice screamed for control, even as her heart drowned it. Suddenly, Ijeoma pulled away, her chest heaving as if she had just surfaced from deep waters. "We shouldn't," she stammered, her voice shaky and filled with guilt. Odeh stepped back, his own breathing labored, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "Ijeoma," he began, his voice soft but insistent. "We can't fight this." Her trembling hands covered her lips, still tingling from the kiss, and tears welled up in her eyes. Confusion and desire battled within her, each one threatening to consume her whole. Ijeoma's legs felt weak as she leaned against the lamppost for support, her thoughts a whirlwind of guilt and longing. Odeh took a step closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You can run from me, but you can't run from what you feel," he said, his words piercing her defenses. She shook her head, biting her lip to hold back the tears. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't deny the truth in his eyes. Every fiber of her being was drawn to him, even as her mind screamed for her to stop. "Ijeoma, I need you to listen," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I don't know how to stop wanting you, and I'm not sure I want to." His confession left her breathless, her heart pounding louder than ever. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze, afraid of what she might say, but his words lingered in the air, refusing to let her escape their weight. For a moment, the world stood still, their futures hanging in the balance. Unbeknownst to them, they were not alone. From behind the trees, a figure watched silently, their presence masked by the night. The figure's sharp eyes followed every movement, every glance, every stolen moment between the two. A faint rustle of leaves broke the silence, but neither Ijeoma nor Odeh noticed. Whatever secrets they thought were safe, the Watcher now knew them all. Unable to take it anymore, Ijeoma turned and walked away, her steps hurried and unsteady. "I can't do this," she muttered under her breath, though her body ached with the loss of his touch. Odeh stood frozen, watching her retreat, the weight of her absence hitting him like a storm. He wanted to call out, to stop her, but something told him it wasn't the right time. The night swallowed her figure, leaving him alone under the dim streetlight. Odeh leaned against the lamppost, his head tilted back as he stared at the stars above. He couldn't shake the memory of her lips, her touch, her eyes filled with conflicted desire. What have I done? He whispered to the night, his voice heavy with regret. But deep down, he knew this was far from over. His heart wasn't ready to let go, and he doubted hers was either. Ijeoma sat in her room, her hands trembling as she clutched her diary. Each word she tried to write felt heavier than the last. Her lips still burned from Odeh's kiss, and her reflection in the mirror seemed like that of a stranger. "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" she whispered, her voice thick with tears. She closed her eyes, memories of his touch flooding her senses. A tear rolled down her cheek, and she whispered, "I'm losing myself." The room felt suffocating, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave. Odeh stood in the shower, the cold water doing little to extinguish the heat of his thoughts. His hands pressed against the tiled wall, his head hanging low. The memory of Ijeoma's touch haunted him, and every second apart from her felt unbearable. "What have I done?" he muttered, his voice lost in the sound of the water cascading around him. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the desire. His heart felt like it was being torn in two, one part wanting her, the other terrified of what it meant. Later that evening, Ijeoma ventured out, hoping a walk would clear her mind. The cool breeze kissed her skin, but the storm inside her remained. She froze when she saw Odeh standing by the park entrance, his hands buried in his pockets. Their eyes met, and for a moment time stood still. "I wasn't expecting to see you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "I couldn't stay away," he admitted. The distance between them vanished as they were drawn to each other like magnets. As they walked side by side through the empty park, their hands brushed occasionally, sending sparks through both of them. "We can't keep doing this," Ijeoma said, her voice breaking. But her words lacked conviction. Odeh stopped and turned to her, his eyes piercing through her defenses. "Tell me you don't feel this," he challenged, his voice low and urgent. She opened her mouth to speak, but found herself lost in his gaze. Words failed her, and before she could think, he pulled her into an embrace that spoke volumes. Ijeoma's breath hitched as Odeh's arms tightened around her, pulling her closer. His lips grazed her temple, and she shivered despite the warmth of his touch. "This is wrong," she whispered, but her hands betrayed her, clinging to him as though he were her lifeline. "Then tell me to stop," he murmured, his lips hovering inches from hers, but she couldn't. Instead, she closed the distance, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was as passionate as it was forbidden. As they lost themselves in each other, neither noticed the faint crunch of leaves nearby. Hidden among the trees, the shadowy figure from before watched intently, their posture rigid and their eyes fixed on the couple. A sinister smile played on their lips as they pulled out a phone, the camera lens glinting in the faint light. "Secrets have a way of coming out," they muttered, snapping several photos before disappearing into the night. Hours later, Odeh's phone buzzed on his bedside table. His eyes widened as he read the message. "I saw everything. Meet me tomorrow or the truth comes out." Panic set in as his mind raced. Who was this? What did they want? Across town, Ijeoma received the same message. The weight of their secret bore down on them both, threatening to shatter everything they had tried to protect. And somewhere in the shadows, their watcher was already planning the next move.